Hello, welcome to CXT, the podcast from Engine, where we explore the art and science of reimagining customer experiences. Now, on the podcast, we often talk about best in class, but rarely do we talk about best in class in terms of person. So today, I'm really excited because we're joined by Bryan Thompson, who really is a best in class leader in passenger experience, in airport operations and airport development. Now, over the years, Bryan has had many roles. He's been the executive officer in charge of master planning at NEOM. He's been the chief executive officer at Abu Dhabi Airports and the VP of airport development at Dubai Airports. Bryan, it's fantastic having you on the show. Could you please start by telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Thanks for the flattering introduction. Just a little bit brief about me. I was the Senior Vice President for Development at Dubai Airport. After that, Chief Executive Officer of Abu Dhabi, which was going through at the time a major redevelopment, new terminal, and a real focus on customer experience and the customer strategy. From there, I went to NEOM as the Executive Director for Airports. And like everybody knows, NEOM is one of those future cities focused on future travel and making travel pretty much at the heart of everybody's experience when they move in and out of the city. So looking after 2 airport developments within NEOM. And now I have a bit of a dual hat. I'm an advisor for AECOM, looking after their Middle East and North Africa developments, as well as an operating partner with GIP, who looks at airports around the world. We've got airports in Europe and Australasia and expanding around the globe.
Passenger experience must play an enormous part of that, and it feels like passenger experience is increasingly becoming critical within aviation. But where has that story started? How did passenger experience become such a critical thing within aviation?
Yeah, I mean, it really is an interesting question. I think the evolution of how customers have been treated at airports has really evolved over time. I think, when aviation first started, airport terminals were small and aircraft were big. So a lot of the experience was caviar and roast chickens on board the aircraft with silver teapots and those type of experiences, where when you were going through the airport, it was a very quick process. There was no real security. You go quickly through the airport and spent a lot of time on the aeroplane. I think over time, those processes have changed. The responsibilities of the various players has changed, and airports terminals have become big and aircraft have become small. And as much as they've saved a lot of weight, and they do as little as possible on board the aircraft, and you do as much as possible as you can at the airport terminal. So, time has been an interesting player within the journey of customers. And I think if you go back to the relationship between the airports and airlines, the airline was the customer. The passenger was not the customer of the airport. The customer of the airline was the passenger, and we looked after what the airlines needed. That was generally represented by International Airport Transport Association. And so the relationship between the airports and the airlines really was represented through manuals and design manuals, which was prepared by airlines and airline groups that said, how do we create a commercial relationship to develop airports, and who pays for these? Traditionally, it was funded by states, municipalities, those type of things that built the terminals, and that's all changed. So airports are now flourishing businesses which look at their own service standards in terms of how do they set a commercial relationship, and the passenger has really transformed from being the customer only of the airline to the customer of the airport. And there's some very valuable transitions within that space that's looked after by the airport now, as opposed to which traditionally was looked after by the airlines. So passengers are spending a lot of time in the terminal. Their needs have changed from being, just duty free to specialty retail, to food and beverage, to high end food and restauranteering taking place now. So you get Michelin star chefs at some airports now looking to see how they can entice customers to spend more time with them. So the journey definitely has changed over time. For some of your listeners, they'll be familiar with ACI, Airport Council International. Airport Council International really has taken up a major role in terms of claiming back some of that customer experience space from the airlines, so that they can set the tone in terms of how airports are judged in terms of service standards. So to Skytrax play that bit of a bridge between the airline and the airport. So it's been a very interesting journey in terms of how things have changed. I started doing some work in the 1990s with a group called ATRA, who were working with IATA at the time, and that IATA that survey then moved into ACI, who took over pretty much the full fundamental 37 steps that they were measuring for customer experience. So it's definitely changed, and I think it'll continue to evolve.
that measurement, so ASQ, ACI, Skytrax, all that stuff that they're doing, that measurement, I feel, has been critical, because that's really been about setting benchmarks, setting standards. It's encouraged airports, airlines to really kind of capture a lot of data about that. The findings are published. It encourages competition. It promotes best practice. So it feels like there's an enormous amount of momentum behind all of that now. I was really interested in what you were saying about this, the transition going from passengers, we'll call them, used to be the customers of the airlines. They're now the customers of the airports. It's sort of like handing over things. That there must be an enormous amount of collaboration then within the experience to deliver a journey that customers want, between airlines, between partners, between the airports, between all the various retailers. That must be very complex to organize and get right.
Yeah, and that's where I think data plays a big role. Understanding your customer, understanding the demographics of the customer, where they come from, where they're going to. At airports such as Dubai Airport, where you have fairly niche journeys for specific airlines, it's easier to organize around what those customers want. At some airports, you'll have 104 airlines or 105 airlines operating through a single terminal building, all with a share of that space. And then it becomes incredibly complex to make sure that you're offering something for everyone, because you don't have a specific group of people that are organized in a way with an onboard experience which is very similar to the terminal experience. You do see that particularly in the Middle East, where you have a dominant host carrier and a dominant ground experience, which is really looked after by the dominant host carrier, so that you can have some form of similarity in the experience between what happens on the ground and in the air. When you get into other parts of the world, the dominance of the home carrier does not always carry through into the dominance of what's experienced inside the terminal building. So, that tug of war between the experiences is an interesting one to watch. But fundamentally, where we see the change is really understanding the groups of passengers that are traveling through the terminal, and at what time, and what you can do for them in terms of making sure that they're comfortable. Now, it sounds like a selfless experience. It's generally not selfless. A lot of this is driven by commercial value to make sure that everybody gets what they want out of the experience, but also it becomes something that's valuable in terms of creating some form of share of wallet for airports. So, um, by making people feel comfortable and welcomed on that journey, generally you create that, and we look at it a bit of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The primary requirement for a passenger when they're going through the airport is really to get through quickly, make sure that they feel safe and secure. And if you can service all of that within a certain time period, you then are able to start, and it's not upsell, but it's to create opportunities for them to engage in those commercial opportunities once they're through and feeling a bit more comfortable.
Yeah, we talked about this in a previous episode. This idea of once you've dealt with that security and kind of getting people settled, then it's just this idea of almost then identifying kind of destinations within the airport for different people to go to for particular needs, whether it's kind of to eat, to shop, to relax, whatever. So what part does and how does passenger experience thinking sort of manifest within airport strategy and planning? Where does that conversation take place? Is it at a really, really high level, or is it down at a tactical level?
Well, I mean, there's an interesting concept, because primarily airports are required to make sure that they have enough capacity to satisfy the requirements of those peak hours. So, from a strategy perspective, the first point to start is how many people are going to come and use the airport, how many airlines are coming, do you have enough space, and if you have enough space, how quickly can you get them through in terms of certain benchmarks? Because in the old days, IATA used to have the IATA level of service, which took you from an A, B, C, D, E, A being the best, E being the worst. And with that was a certain amount of space per passenger and a certain amount of time per process point. With the evolution of those processes in terms of smartening up security, smartening up check-in, when I say smartening up, making them quicker and be less invasive, you're giving time back to the customer as they go through the building. So when you're concerning yourself on the early stage of when you're concerning yourself with the early stage of planning, you're really looking to say, does the asset have enough infrastructure to deal with the loads that are coming through it? And if you can put a tick, you then start to look at what next you have to do for those customers in terms of lounge space, shopping. And shopping's changing over time. Shopping really has started to look at being more destination oriented, and you can use somewhere like Dubai or Abu Dhabi as a point in case, where people can now buy very much more products and produce that are from the location of where the airport used to be. There was a period of time, and I would say the early 2000s, where airports were very generic. The shopping was very generic. Everything was steel and glass in terms of terminal building, but you could buy a Toblerone and same bottle of scotch, and generally that was out throughout all of the airports. And as airports have become more of a destination that reflects the host city or the host country, the goods and services that you can buy inside the terminal are generally reflected of that city. And Dubai, as I said, you can buy now, curios which reflect Dubai, but you can also start to buy more high-end products that are only available in Dubai in duty-free. So that's not by chance, that's by strategy. So you've done the first step. Have we got enough space? Have we got enough place? Can we make people feel comfortable? Yes. But then what is it that they need in terms of making them want to spend more time and spend more money at the terminal in terms of satisfying their requirements while they're waiting? And particularly the work that's done in Dubai really follows a longer term cycle, looking ahead of the customer, making sure that they're ready. And that's something that's happened in other airports, Abu Dhabi, and when you start going around the world, airports are really focusing on what the customer will want, not what the customer wants today.
So this idea that airports are very deliberately trying to ensure that the experiences they're providing, once it passes the sort of the baseline of being fast and easy, that they feel more of the place, they are more distinct. I can understand that being driven, for example, because of the choice that passengers or airlines have in terms of where they connect through. So, for example, I think in Dubai airports, almost like 80%, 8% of their passengers were kind of connecting passengers. So they might have a choice about where they connected through. Is that generally what drives this need or this desire to provide kind of distinct experiences that have a sense of place? Why aren't they just creating the best beige experience they can? Why do they want to make them different and stand out from other airports?
Yeah, again, it does go back to that strategy point. So, international hubs really become international hubs because of the connectivity that they provide globally. So again, it's not by accident that Dubai, Hamad International, Singapore, Malaysia all become global hubs. They become global hubs because the airlines create a network that allows them to connect the globe, 286 destinations through one point. That's done through network economics. So they do that because it drives the behavior of the airline as a big beast in terms of how it connects and flies those, the airplanes to where they need to fly. Once they get to that point, then you find airports potentially do provide the beige, single experience that does not necessarily represent the city. But if you look Singapore, Malaysia, Dubai as a case in point, you then start to look at, is there an opportunity to create an experience at the airport that entices that customer to come back to the host city? And Singapore did this very well in the 2000s. Fly through Singapore, you get 2 nights accommodation on the main shopping street inside Singapore, free of charge, paid for by the airline. And that tapered off over time, but it was a deliberate strategy to show off the wares of Singapore to those customers as they came through the terminal. Dubai, very similar, not necessarily the same concept in terms of how they provided, but you now have a deliberate strategy of showcasing Dubai to 84 million people as they fly through the airports. And some of those get enticed to come back because the city has just got so much more to offer. And that glimpse of the city that you get when you come through to Dubai airport is really something. And again, Dubai is just being used as a reference point. You get the similar experiences in Doha or in Singapore and Malaysia, but the intent is that it creates some form of connection with you as a passenger that may only just fly through once, but you look back and you think, man, that was easy to connect. People were friendly. The services were mostly electronic. And when I got inside that duty-free zone, I saw these statues of Burj Khalifa or of Burj Al Arab or camels and the desert safaris. maybe I should go back and try that. And those types of experiences are becoming increasingly digital, where countries are showcasing in some form of digital format what the country has to offer. So that's not by chance, that's by strategy. It does connect more globally now to cities, to airports, to the world. So that opportunity to showcase the city is something that's very deliberate. And is working, because you do see those trends
Yeah,
where those global hubs were primarily large transfer loads. Those large transfer loads where those strategies have been deliberate have changed to greater share of O&D, and those O&D passengers come through, they stay in hotels, they go out for dinner, they visit the beaches and the resorts, no matter which city it is. So keeping that balance is important to make sure that you can keep the connectivity and really efficient transfer loads. But it does change and ebbs and flows over time.
yeah. And whilst you're saying that, it's so evident the sort of the you talk about the importance of passenger experience from driving revenue, shareholder value, satisfaction, partners, customers within airports, but actually there's an enormous driver there about just wider kind of economic value to the region, and that kind of relationship between the airport being sort of the gateway to that region to bring people back and through is absolutely critical. I just want to go back. You spoke earlier about the sort of the evolution of passenger experience and how spaces were changing and how technology was changing, biometrics, automation, AI, etc. That's going to massively reshape the experience. Do you think there are things to watch out for in that? How's the role of technology going to change? How's the role of people going to change within airports? Are they as environments going to change greatly?
Well, I mean, if I had that crystal ball, I think I'd customize and become a very wealthy man. I think I think the short answer is yes, it's going to change. I think data is hugely valuable, and being able to understand the data, index it, and commercialize it is not just a priority for airports. That's a priority for all businesses at the moment, is to understand the data, understand um, the impact of certain changes that you've made to your processes and the implications that that could have for the bottom line. Now, I think machine learning will speed up that process. I think machine learning will get to a point where it will take the data, give you a very good analysis of the implications of change. So change and the speed of change to the bottom line will tighten up. So and again, that could come from understanding passengers coming through the airport in every 15 minutes, and then can you change your commercial proposition to satisfy that? So um, you need to break it down into certain terms of controllables and uncontrollables, because those are very localized problems which you can then solve as an airport and then satisfy as an airport. And you can see this will be something that airports have talked about omni-channel and digitizing the shopping experience for a long time. I think with AI, understanding passenger profiles and as they move and their requirements, you will be able to digitize that and satisfy shopping and food and bev. You'll be able to get whatever you want, wherever you want within the precinct of the terminal. It'll come to you. So I think there'll be changes there. The uncontrollables, because of global harmonization, is going to be interesting to watch around biometrics and AI for passenger processing. And there's global rules in terms of data that you can share about the individual and biometrics of an individual across certain areas. So you've always had advanced passenger processing and advanced passenger information, which is approved data flows between different governments around the movements of people. But the gathering of that data and the volume of data that we have on individuals is just changing exponentially. So whether there'll be a way that you could harmonize that globally and use that to improve the customer experience, I think will be an interesting opportunity in terms of speeding up processes. There are some trials that are happening now in the Asia Pac region where you could potentially share the images of the X-ray machines on departure with arrivals customs teams. So could get to a point where a international flight arrives in a domestic bay with targeted customs and immigration requirements for individuals as opposed to the entire aircraft. So they could look inside a bag, share that information with the next arriving airport, and say, in that bag, there is something that you may want to check, and that bag belongs to Bryan Thompson. In that case, the 99 people coming off the flight get to go by themselves, and you may be called out and individually searched and screened. The challenge with that is the global harmonization of the ability to share the same quality images with the right people at the right time, so that that process becomes standard and harmonized across the globe. So the pace of change will probably require some form of building block model that allows countries to move incrementally through stages of how they share data and information to improve their processes. And I mean, again, there's certain legal requirements in terms of being able to do this, which I think will become equally challenging.
It sort of feels like in the near term future, there's going to be potentially sort of inconsistency in the sense that your experience going between sort of airports in the same tier who have the same sort of level of technology and ability to share information, might be one type of experience. But if you're going from like a tier 1 to a tier 2 airport, that might be different, and there could then be some inherent frustrations for the passengers, as we're seeing like right now around the way that security about whether liquids need to be unpacked or not unpacked. There's frustration in passengers because they expect one thing in one airport, and then in another it becomes completely different. So that's going to be a degree of turmoil, I expect.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an interesting use case, because if you have a look at that, that is part of this global harmonization and building block model, because Europe has set standards when they require all of the machines to be of a certain standard that liquids can stay in the bag. The US will have a certain time frame, and at some stage the globe will harmonize. But in the interim period, there is that frustration that comes through of, at this airport I don't have to take my laptop and liquids out, and at this airport I can, it will happen. But if you have a look at the rapid pace of change that's taken place, even if it's just on security machines, X-ray, there's some great airports in the world. You look at Gatwick in terms of the flows that they get through on individual lanes in the morning peak. That contributes to the whole customer experience, because you're not sitting in a queue for 5 minutes anymore. You're walking straight through, and then you get the opportunity to say, okay, well, I want to shop. I want to grab a cup of coffee or a croissant before I get on my flight. So there's some real change that technology has made in the customer experience. And again, you come back to the Amazons or hyperscalers of the world that are looking at, and you look at online shopping as a process 5 years ago till today. This rapid change that's taken place, and primarily that's in the back end, that's in the warehousing, autonomous warehousing, last mile delivery. So airports they've started the journey, but there's a long way to go in terms of being able to match some of the improvements that technology is making in industries around the world.
And I guess technology as well is going to narrow down the window of opportunity to sort of commercialize the passenger's experience. So when things do get quicker and faster and easier, and like right now, you might have many passengers turning up, a couple of hours before their flight. It's traditionally they've got used to that, But in the future, when things are going to be far faster, you might have people turning up, confidently, and half an hour before things are due to depart, and that presents problems from a commercial model perspective for retailers within the airport, doesn't it?
I mean, again, this comes back to the point I raised around omni-channel and digitization of the airport shopping experience, because a lot more people are going online prior to their arrival at the airport, pre-buy, pick up, and go. It also comes back to the point we made right at the beginning, is understanding your customer, because a lot of those customers that will do the 25 minutes to 30 minutes prior to departure arrival do this 12 times a year at a minimum. They've got the confidence in the system. They've built the confidence in the system, and probably weren't going to shop anyway. They want to get from the curbside to the lounge to the aircraft in as little time as possible. And they're probably the guy that sits next to you and doesn't want to talk to you, because they do this every day of the week. But then, that same guy will travel 3 weeks later with his family and want to spend time at a restaurant so that everybody can have something to eat before they climb on probably a low cost or economy seat as opposed to the business or first class seat, which they'd bought through the lounge. So understanding the play that a single customer can make on a different journey also, is part of that first phase of understanding what people want when they travel through the airport.
You spoke a moment ago about sort of the changes in airport operations, about automation and how that would accelerate things and make enormous differences. I imagine that's going to have a big impact on the people who are working within the airport, the sort of roles that they have. Do you see a sort of a change in what people are doing in the airport? Are their jobs changing? Are they getting more involved in being sort of ambassadors, or dealing more with kind of customer relationships, customer service, than they are with maintenance and handling of things?
Yes, I think airport owners and operators are going to have to look at how they engage their staff to make that experience more engaging. And it's a difficult one. If you look at, probably going back to the previous points we made around some of the transitions from technology. So you look at self-service. The original, the old check-in desks where somebody sat behind the check-in desk and took your bag, printed out your boarding pass. That's changing quite rapidly. That doesn't mean that check-in agent's gone away. In fact, that check-in agent has moved to in front of the check-in counter to assisting you with other things. Is your bag the correct way to put the tag on correctly? But you've gone from processing 40 people through a single desk to 120 people through an automated bag drop. To with the advent of machines and robotics, it's changing. You're getting different ways of picking up a bag, different ways of packing the ULDs, so their role will change from being more physical to being more mental. So how quickly can we load these bags? Can we supervise this? Can we get these in the right order? Those roles will change and are changing. And I think in a good way, it's making the work easier. I don't think it takes the job away. It just makes it a different slant towards the job. And potentially what happens is, instead of having one baggage handler per 50 bags, whatever it might be, you've got one per 1,000, because they're able to do more with less and the machine does the heavy lifting. So
Quite
yeah,
literally.
exactly. So I think that will be part of the change that takes place.
I wanted to explore a little bit about sort of the art and science of actually how you go about sort of designing this passenger experience and thinking about this incredibly intricate multi-stakeholder environment. I think airports are a very, very unique context within which to design passenger experiences. From the passenger's point of view, it's just one experience, but actually there are so many actors, stakeholders, agencies, partners in there that are necessary to kind of deliver that single experience. What advice would you give to how you kind of go about beginning to change or develop or define that experience in that real sort of multi-stakeholder environment? That seems like a really big collaborative undertaking.
Yeah, and I do think that's largely the greatest challenge for airports, is to create that common data set that everybody understands they're working towards the same point. Now, everybody may have different views in terms of what they need to do at the respective touch points, but one of the things that definitely has transformed over the last 5 years is creating a shared understanding of the common problem. And I think in terms of collaboration and bringing stakeholders along for the journey, nobody wants to be surprised when they go to work and suddenly there's 1,000 people at the desk queuing up to come through into the border. And that's where you get agencies offside. So they need to be part of the process in terms of understanding how to solve the problem early on. And so collaboration with across the board, but particularly with government agencies, because they have a lot more going on behind the scenes that none of us really know about, in terms of problems that they're solving on the back end. So for us, making sure that when we do that first phase planning and understanding of where the problems are coming from, they join you with that and they understand, come up with ways of solving that, because sometimes you can avoid the problem altogether. Because sometimes you create a process just because you think it needs to exist, and often they know what they're required to do and they can almost bypass that because they understand what their legal requirements are. So collaboration really starts with forming a good, robust, common data set that everybody can work off, and then from there having a bit of a shared understanding of who gets to take place, who gets to solve the problems in that tiered model that we talked of. And primarily, a lot of the processes are solved within that hierarchy of needs. You really have to get through this as painlessly and as quickly as possible in a way that puts you in a mood to start engaging with the rest of the experiences. And different airports solve that in different ways, because you do have a tiered approach in terms of, you can have a lounge that you can pay for. You can have a lounge that's part of your product. You can have a hotel. You can have duty free. You can have a chocolatier. You can have a coffee shop. All of these things don't just happen. It comes back to, again, the very first point. And I know you have done one of these podcasts with James Samperi. So, sometimes people like James come and help you with 100 different people that go out there and ask the customers what they want. And it really is a conversation. It's one of those things. And some of the techniques we found is that face-to-face conversation helps a lot more than a digital iPad survey. It really is. What did you do today? How did you feel? What did this make you feel? So getting an in-depth understanding of the customer really allows you to shape the next stage of the journey. But there are some fundamentals in that journey which just have to happen, and you have to do them as well as you can. But that next phase is really understanding. We talk about gate huggers and people that are really anxious travelers, and they want to get to the gate, they want to see the sign, they want to see their airplane, and that's where they're going to sit. Now, you can do whatever you want. They're not going to change their behavior. Often, you have to change the way we shape our shopping experience and the way that the airport makes you feel more comfortable to their requirements, putting stuff closer to them, making them feel more at home, and they get eyes length there. They can see what they need to do there, and okay, they can go and get a coffee and a croissant because they can see the gate they've got, and they know what they want to eat. So nothing beats a good, hearty conversation with your customer to know what they need, and then collating and collaborating across the patch with all of your commercial tendencies to deliver a great experience for your customer takes time, and it does take data, and it does take understanding the needs.
Yeah, that empathy, that customer centricity, and I think it's you made a very good point about what you've got to avoid is various different sort of agencies kind of just solving the problem as they see it just directly in their own lane. They have to sort of understand the breadth of the experience and the impact of a decision that they might make. So they might, for example, in terms of where we gate aircraft, etc. There might be decisions taking about where certain aircraft are gated, which turn out to be, as far away as they possibly could be from retail opportunities. But that's one department kind of making an intelligent decision from an efficiency point of view that's having an impact on retail, because passengers for those flights have a long way to travel and just skip past all the retail opportunities to get onto their planes. So there needs to be a real kind of joined up thinking to bring those things together.
Again, one of the more obvious ones nowadays is, as the borders become more automated, inbound passport controls more seamless, you've got automated inbound borders. The bag delivery times used to be they used to consider a queue time. So when you go back to the old IATA principles, they considered a queue time for inbound immigration. They considered a processing time and a time for you to get from the aircraft to that point. As these processes have changed, you've really got to the bag reclaim much quicker than you used to. Now all you do is you stand around waiting for your bag. And so what's had to happen is that inbound bag process has had to speed up, because passengers get very frustrated standing there watching the belt go around and nothing's on it. So, that balance between the efficiency of the border really has to then be rebalanced with the efficiency of the inbound bag process. And, you can see innovations taking place there now where some airports are actually showing you where your bag is. So you stand at the belt, there's a foot screen that says your bag is 11 minutes away. Okay, I need to do something else. Or your bag's 25 seconds and it's on the belt. Maybe not your individual bag, but the first bag coming from that flight. So these are ebbs and flows, and these are the things that have to change as you smarten up and as you get things happening far quicker. There is that knock-on effect and sometimes unintended consequences of your efficiency.
So thinking about like the master planning and the build of an airport. So there are lots of airports that are looking towards massively ramping up their capacity, and that means that either regionally, like entirely new airports are being built, or extensive redevelopments are taking place at existing airports. That what are the implications from that from a passenger experience point of view? I guess within a greenfield site where you're building an airport from scratch for the first time, you have a great opportunity to kind of set out a master plan that is coherent and complementary from a passenger experience point of view. But when you're looking at a brownfield site where you're trying to develop the airport whilst the airport is still operating to change the passenger's experience or to enhance the passenger experience, that creates real problems. Are there very different approaches you need to take with doing that? How does that affect things from a master planning perspective?
It's very interesting. And if you have a look at Abu Dhabi, the new terminal that's just been opened there, which is brownfield but a greenfield terminal, then you look at the phenomenal experience that new airport gives. I mean, if you haven't been through it, it is worthwhile to go and have a look at what modern day good master planning and that collaboration through the airport experience can look like, because it is a phenomenal terminal. And it offers a very unique experience to Abu Dhabi travelers, and really something to go and have a look at. But there is an old adage that airports are the only construction site with a runway attached, because by by definition, the way master planning is done, you will look to 20 years ahead and you'll say, okay, this little airport in where it is, small country town, is going to be doing 20 million passengers by 2035. You don't go and build 20 million passengers worth of capacity, because that small town may grow to that size in that period of time. What you do is you create, if you consider it at master planning stage, an incremental master plan that allows you to develop over time and considers the impact of that growth. So you may oversize your processing facility and undersize your gates and add on the gates as you go through, which is traditionally what a lot of airports do. But good master planning does consider good growth, and good growth is generally then added on incrementally as you go through, with due consideration of the customer impact while that construction takes place. Now, sometimes you don't have the luxury of understanding how things are going to grow. I mean, if you have a look at some of the phenomenal growth in small towns, which were small towns in India, which are now metropolises, sometimes you have to start over. And I worked on the Mumbai project, the new airport in Mumbai. And at a point in time, we had a 49% year-on-year growth in traffic. And this was not just an impact of COVID. This was just an impact of just huge economic growth. We were building new terminals. We had old terminals all being expanded. And then what I call operational intervention, in terms of manual interface with humans, getting involved, mitigating the problems becomes paramount, because solving that problem sometimes just requires a pair of eyeballs and a good set of hands that can assist people in a congested environment. So sometimes that operational intervention becomes required, and often is required, when you have this interface between construction and service delivery. But it's something that should be planned and should be deliberate. And in the planning and in the deliberate action, you do need to reserve some capacity for unknowns, because there will be unknowns during that time that you will need to respond to. And again, over the past probably 15 years, there's this new career in airports, which is operational readiness and testing. A long time ago, that wasn't considered. It was always considered part of the project job or the operations job. Now, it's a key industry. It's a key part of the industry, where you have teams of people focused, and consulting firms that are built primarily around making sure that transition from project to operation happens in a way that doesn't impact on the brand or the value of the brand of an organization as they move into these new buildings.
It's such a challenging process, and as you say, often it's about sort of, boots on the ground, and therefore having the right people there is critical. So, thinking about people watching this podcast, if someone's sort of beginning to set out on their journey, we've talked about the need to to get the data right, to understand that, kind of get a single view. We've talked about the need to collaborate. What advice would you give for someone who is very much kind of beginning on their journey to begin to engage with enhancing a passenger experience? What would be some of the sort of the first steps you'd recommend that they took?
Again, I think it comes down to authenticity. Be authentic. Know know where you are. I've traveled through to the Seychelles a number of times, and the Seychelles is a different experience. But when you're arriving there, the airport's not front of mind. You get off the plane, you look to your right, and it's this beautiful vista of beach and green and ocean. So, a lot of the time is understand what you want to be and where you want to be when you start these developments, and understanding what your customers actually require. Take care of the basics. Make sure you get the basics right, because we look at people are prepared to stand in queues. Not everybody has a huge problem with standing in a queue, but understand that their time is as valuable as your time and as the next person's time. So if you can do something about it, do it. Make sure that you amend and make sure that your processes are as slick as possible, and that you continue to evolve those and innovate to make sure that those changes complement and get back to what the customer is looking for. As I said, remain authentic, understand your place where you are, and the people using our facilities are humans. Engage with them, understand their needs, understand their requirements, because sometimes there's some surprising insight when you're sitting down and understanding individuals' requirements as they're starting to plan to come through your airport. So, airport planning is quite linear as an equation. One of these gives you 5 of those, gives you that much time. So it is quite easy to do that calculation correctly. Take the time to do it correctly. Make sure you plan for enough growth. Engage with your customers. Don't surprise your partners and your service delivery agents that are coming with you. Government agencies, your concessionaires. They don't like surprises. Nobody likes surprises. So make sure everybody's on the same page when you're going through these things. And it sounds easy, and I think you mentioned that in the beginning, but it is the most complex part of that, because equally there's personalities and big personalities that all have their own bosses and their own outcomes that they're trying to achieve, which may not always be the same as yours. But if you can find common ground and a way to deliver those things, that's the right place to start. And I think, the customers that we see coming through airports now are really changing. Sustainability matters, particularly in areas where it's undeniable that we need to change. So engage and understand those. Do your best to start becoming a good corporate and global citizen on all counts. The way you treat your people, the way you treat your environment, the way you treat your customers. And never stop. I think there's this master planning as an airport function was quite functional. So it used to be a 5-year plan. Did it, put it on the shelf, 5 years back it came, and that's changed. I think the evolution of that has changed. So use that as an opportunity, as a start point, but don't stop innovating. Don't stop thinking about your customers. Stop thinking about your processes and process efficiency. And often improving the processes and the smoothness of those processes gives you so much space back and so much infrastructure back that you don't have to build new stuff. You can actually just do it so much better and use that space for delighting the customer in other ways.
Bryan, you've been so generous with your time, with your ideas, sharing your experiences. It's been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely brilliant. We're going to put some resources in the description on the podcast for people to learn more. We have some stuff on there around passenger experience, self-assessments that they can use, and various other bits and pieces. But from me, from the show, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant to have you on.